Chciałem Państwa wszystkich powitać, ale równocześnie też podzielić się jedną informacją. Dzisiaj z rana dostałem wiadomość od żony pana. W związku z tym, to niestety tak się zdarza, jest to osoba wprawdzie bardzo żywa, ale wiek już też tutaj pan, który ma około 90 lat. W związku z tym, niestety, ale będziemy musieli zrezygnować z tej próby studyjnej. Jeśli Państwo nic nie będą mieli przeciwko temu, połączymy te grupy i pojedziemy do Walizję. W związku z tym, tak więc to prowadzenie po Wrocławiu po prostu wypadnie, ponieważ wprawdzie mógłbym sam Państwa poprowadzić, ale to nie jestem ja, tak zrobiłem tego jako wojskowy z Podle. Tak? Muszę się zastanowić. Ja się chcę być alternatywą dla pana Podlaka, więc ja tak nie potrafię opowiadać. Ale ja się proszę Państwa na tym postanowię, ponieważ tutaj musiałem podjąć już decyzję co do szkoły, uczniów i tak dalej. Po prostu nie mogę się wstrzymać, że dzisiaj jest piątek, to już jest po południu i tutaj musiałem też decyzję podjąć w tej sprawie. W związku z tym, jeżeli będzie mała grupa, która koniecznie będzie chciała Wrocław zobaczyć i te miejsca, to nie ma problemu. To możemy wsiąść na oddech pojechać, a reszta po prostu może wsiąść tylko do autobusu i też jechać do Walina. Polecam też Walin, to znaczy to jest może alternatywa, to również ważne miejsce. Tak więc dziękuję.
Welcome back to our conference for the kind of line, which is miscellaneous topics in its title. We have three presenters. The first one is Starski, who will talk about Bielawska Branch Concentration Camp in Strażnicza in Miscellaneous. Every presentation will have 15 minutes and then we will move on to the discussion.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I sit down? I'm sorry, because I'm rather a bit handicapped, and that is why I prefer sitting. Will I? Okay? Thank you very much. So, I'm very happy to meet you here in Wrocław, and the actual presentation will refer to this area, the Lower Silesia. In general, I will tell you it's of course now part of Poland. It was part of Poland in the Middle Ages, but later a long time German. And the German name of this city was Breslau. But now I will tell you where is the library. Okay, and I will ask you to go to another place in the Lower Silesia, to the southwest. Look, that is the map, touristic map, showing the biggest city in this area. Wrocław is here. Oh, Wrocław is here. Yeah, Wrocław. And that is Dzierżoniów. Dzierżoniów was in German the Reichenbach. So the creek that was very rich of fishes and so on. But this is a special place, a bigger city, Dzierżoniów, a smaller city, Pieszyce here, and Bielawa. Our place, I will be talking about. So, but some people say that in Poland we have three towns. The first is Gdańsk, Gdynia, Sopot in the north, and three towns here, Dzierżoniów, Pieszyce, Bielawa. I will be telling about them. But during the Second World War, in this place, only 10 months. At the end of the Second World War, Bielawa was a branch of concentration camp of Wrocław. In Polish is Rogoźnica, but it is in another place in the north, near Jawor and Rogoźnica here. It's about 35 kilometers from here. Okay, let's start from the presentation. We are in Wrocław, and if you go from here through the University Bridge, you can see the University main building, and there is a very interesting orientation place. But not far from here, on the other side of the center of the city, is a big building of the provincial court. And on the opposite side of the street, there is a table. May I show the table? Oh, that is the table telling about the unknown people who died at the concentration camps in the Lower Silesia. So it was the reason why I am interested in this subject. And then I will be making next steps in the archives, of course. I was talking to the people, and so on and so on. And if you look at that, you can see that Großrosen, so a big rose, in English, a big rose, Großrosen, a rose, big rose. And Großrosen has more than 130 branches in small villages, also in big cities like Wrocław, Breslau, many factories, plants were full of people who work obligatorily there. So if you see this place, you can see that in this place at Bielawa were two branches, not only one. The German name was very, I will tell, funny, because German name was Langenbielau. Lang is long. Bielau is Bielawa. So long Bielawa. Really, the village is very long, about 8 kilometers. So long village. So Langenbielau. And there were two branches, Langenbielau 1 and Langenbielau 2. So number 1 and number 2. Two branches. The first branch was for men, about 300 people. So not so many, but in the women part was more, 1,000. But in the special moment, I mean, at the end of the Second World War, the number, some people say that it was about 3,000, but other people say that 5,000 prisoners here. But I think that 3,000 is the maximum. You can see now the places in the city of Langenbielau, that time German Langenbielau, so Bielawa. So the city is quite big. I will tell the number of inhabitants that time was 65,000, so not so small. And the biggest factory there was Christian Dierig textile factory. Christian Dierig established the factory in the year 1844, so a long time. But during the Second World War, this factory was the main factory for obligatorily made work by the prisoners of Großrosen branch. So the factory was really very big. It was a textile factory, so it was connected with weaving. Okay, and now the buildings where the people lived. In these buildings, there were 12, but earlier was a big amount of that, and now it exists. You can go here, look around, and I think no one can tell that it was connected with any concentration or labor camp. It's quite normal buildings, we can see. And here is the estimated number of prisoners, told as 2,000 to 7,000, I will tell you. Because my presentation is connected with only 10 months of the end of the Second World War, from July 1944 to May, so end of the war, to May 1945. And now there are a lot of plaques, tablets, telling about the people who died there or were working. And you can see there are two plaques. The first is in Polish, another is in Jewish, so Yiddish, written, but it is a very general presentation what places there. But stop now. Look on the left side. You can see I have that written on my paper. It is very interesting because during our conference there are, I think, 2 people from Holland. Am I right? I don't know. 2 people from Holland, and it is connected with the Dutch Jews. Not only Jews. I was talking to my wife yesterday, and we were looking for the places of birth, and there were not only Jews. There were Jews, Serbs, and Czechs, and also Jews from Holland. The total number of all the people is 13. And what was very interesting, it was written so, surname, first name, date of birth, so daily date of birth, and place of birth. For example, the first man here is Solomon Paniel, probably Jewish, born on the 21st of March 1906 in Veendam in Holland, and died on the 23rd of February 1945. Some of the people, 4, died at the same day. I think it could be so that they were shot on that day, because it is very rare that 4 people from such group died on the same day. Okay, let's go on. So you can see also a document, of a prisoner. Such documents are during the war, of course, and after the war. We were talking today to our friend from France who was talking English, and has shown to us documents after the Second World War in France. And the group of former prisoners was very close, and the people were meeting all the time. You can see some files from the archives here in Wrocław, not far from here. I will tell you, it's about 300 meters, maybe 500 meters to that side is the provincial archives. Oh, in the provincial archives are the seals of the authorities. That is the seal of the German names, Peterswaldau. Peterswaldau in Polish, Pieszyce. It is Pieszyce is in the south. You could see. Dzierżoniów, Pieszyce, Jelawa. And such and all documents were sealed by such a seal. And very often, after the main text of such authorities was written Heil Hitler and signature of someone, as you can see here. And also seals of magistrate of the city council, and the date, the 27th of September 1942. I will tell you a very interesting thing. I was looking all the documents, and I'm sorry, the documents of the cities, of these cities, practically don't exist. Dzierżoniów, okay, it exists, but other 2 were practically destroyed during the war or after the war. But you can imagine, at the end of the war, no one was thinking about writing documents, especially text documents or so. At the end of 1944, no one was talking about that. And the last document I saw was from the 21st of January 1945, and it was quite kind of order. I will tell you, 500 papers to write on machine for typewriting, and gums and so on. Practically nothing interesting. Nothing is written about the camps. And you can see also something here that this table that is in Wrocław is always the place of meeting. And every year the flowers are being left near that place, and also people remember and recognize everything what was 73 years ago. Because, okay, 5 minutes, please go on. Oh, that is the okay. That is the last illustration. The photo of a small town, and in this part, a military part, and all officials, okay, first are official, and another are private. And also some people, private way, established such small stones with names and so on and so forth. So, because we will have now time to discuss, I'm very happy that I used 14 minutes, not 15, and no more. So, I think I will give you voice, and let's talk about these things, please.
Thank you very much. Perfect time management. Shall we move on to the second paper and then we can have a common discussion afterwards?
Thank you very much.
Maybe there are some interactions between the papers, so
Thank you very much for the attention.
thank you. Oh, yeah. Move between the slides.
So, hello again from my side. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much to the Institute that they brought the exhibition also to this conference.
I did not introduce you, of course.
You didn't introduce me, but I was introduced in the very beginning. My name is Andrea Gennis. I'm working in Berlin, and the skills. And,
My bad.
no, everything is fine. And I will speak about a project in which I was involved together with other researchers in the last years. And I think to my background, as I said, I'm a political scientist, and I work in research fields, research projects on contemporary history in Poland and Germany, and in several memorial museums in Poland and in Germany. For instance, Augsburg. With this object, a pocket watch, the Memorial Museum Auschwitz-Birkenau announced the 72nd anniversary of the liberation of the concentration camp. The watch was found in 1967 nearby the gas chamber and crematory number 2 in Birkenau. And we discovered it just recently, together with 16,000 further objects in the archives. In newspapers, this object is perceived as one of the last witnesses for the crimes which were committed at Auschwitz. They had survived in contrast to the huge number of murdered people, and the director of the museum called it a trace. This mobile phone was found in a boat in which 368 people drowned just before Lampedusa last year. It is also perceived as a witness, as one of the only few objects the refugees could take with them, the only possibility to stay in contact with their families and friends. Even more, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung called it in September 2017 a memento mori, which is a realization of one's death. Object and its meaning are more and more discussed in last time. Just this year we had a summer school at the Memorial Museum Ravensburg on this topic. In the frame of the material turn, or the iconic turn, different disciplines ask for the history, their individual stories, their significance for people, or for the relationship between people. I do struggle with the concept of objects as subsidiary witnesses, but obviously they have a meaning and their characterization as remains. Looking at the women's concentration camp Ravensburg, these remains are objects which have a certain meaning for prisoners. These could be everyday items, but necessary in everyday life in the camp. An expressive object is this lipstick, which was found on the area of the former concentration camp. And the main exhibition of the memorial site, which was opened in 2013, and which is worth to see, its meaning is explained with the help of a narrative of a former prisoner who said that the red color of his lipstick on the lips and on the cheeks helped the prisoners to survive the regularly selections in the camp. Even more attention in the exhibition aroused miniatures crafted by the prisoners themselves, often quite artistic and with the help of rather inadequate tools. Sofia Piotrowska-Kahn, who also created the obelisk at the Prague Museum in Warsaw, was one of the most productive artists in Ravensbrück. These artifacts attract many people because they support ideas about the tragedies of surviving, the meaning of skill the women brought with them out of their pre-war life into the camp. And a newly started project at the Memorial Museum Ravensbrück Ravensbrück and Sachsenhausen will bring some light into the history and meaning of those artistic objects. Among others, it will clarify out of which material they are made, and in this sense, out of which working commando the material came from. These objects have a certain meaning because they had an individual relevance for the prisoners. But what does a bundle of copper wire tell us about the production and the life in a concentration camp? And this object was found in 2016 on the former area of the Siemens Production Center at Ravensbrück. And the Siemens Production Center, I don't have a map now, but it was in the south in the camp, so it was very close to the camp. 5 years ago, a group of researchers, members of the International Friends Association of the Ravensbrück Memorial Site, started a project together with the museum on the Siemens Production Center nearby the women's concentration camp Ravensbrück. And this time only little was known about the specific production of this important and very well-known company at Ravensbrück. And I know at least 2 PhD dissertations on this topic, Siemens, which stayed incomplete because the PhD candidates didn't get proper access to the Siemens archives years ago. So this is a really big problem. Meanwhile, this is a positive sign, the attitude of the Siemens company had changed. Regularly, trainees of Siemens take part in seminars at the Ravensbrück Memorial Site, and last but not least, the Siemens Historical Archive gave the financial background for our project and opened its archives to a certain extent. But we didn't find, we found only little documents about the production at Siemens in Ravensbrück. But we had also access to the documents which were sent to Siemens for applying for compensation. So we had names and reports of former prisoners who were at Siemens. It was the idea to deepen the knowledge about this particular working commando and to give the former forced laborers a voice. And for this, this is the result of this project. This is a book which was published this year in German. I'm sorry, I have to look for my. We look for testimonies, memoirs, and reports from different countries in different languages to get a broader and more multi-perspective picture of the special circumstances of a work for a bigger company at a concentration camp. And here I'd like to link to the paper of Tanya this morning, who tried to say that it was that the background of the women which they brought to the camps was very important, and this was one result we had in our project as well. So one couldn't say the Jews had this in the situation, people from Soviet Union had this in the situation, but it was very important. They came from towns, from the countryside, which language skills they brought with them, and so on and so forth. So depending on the background of the women and girls, their knowledge of what they produced was very different. while some women saw themselves working for the V2 fabrication for this important weapon, others could recall quite exactly what they had done. Very often, this was connected with the knowledge of the German language, their education, and the individual background the women brought with them. Astrid Blumsen, this is the Siemens Production Center today. And I want to come to this. Astrid Blumsen Petersen, for instance, started to draw her work, which gave us, together with other narratives, the certainty that the women had to wind spools out of very thin copper wire, and we saw this copper wire. This was one of the reasons why very young women with dedicated hands and good eyes were chosen for the work at Siemens. These spools are a central element in relays, electronic switches, which were implemented in many products of Siemens at Ravensbrück, like telephones, radios, and measuring instruments. With the help of documents, testimonies, and findings on the aerial of Siemens, we were able to describe the forced labor at Siemens better, and it was not the only and not the first attention to torture the prisoners at Siemens. These were other commandos, but at Siemens, and I think this is quite an important point, Siemens produced on a quite high and modern level of fine mechanics. This can be realized by another item which was found on the Siemens aerial, a capacitor which was wrapped, and we see it in this corner and here. This type of capacitor was only recently invented in the middle of the 30s. It allowed using, it's made by paper and aluminium, and it allowed using the technical device under very hard weather conditions, which were more extreme, and this was important, for example, for telephones on the field, so for the war economy. Before, the capacitors contained liquid, which limited the possible use. Secondly, the new capacitor allowed the production of smaller equipment. And this was the inner of the capacitor. This is such a small thing now, and before they were quite big. To realize the relevance of the production at Ravensbrück clarifies once again the political and economic significance of forced labor of Siemens. The women needed concentration and endurance to come through the permanent quality checks of their work. This meant that they were under big pressure. Ongoing bad results would have meant to be sent to another working commando, and in later times of the war, this would have meant to be sent to an overcrowded camp with terrible circumstances. Siemens is called a better working commando in comparison with others. The work was mainly in wooden barracks, which were dry and warm. That was the reason why, for instance, the Polish political prisoner Leokadia Bukala tried to come into the Siemens working commando. After an operation of her leg, she had to find a work which allowed her to sit. But she didn't realize in advance that she had to walk to the Siemens fabric hall more than 1 kilometer. And this meant that she had to walk in the morning 1.5 kilometers back and forth for lunchtime, and in the evening back. So from May to December 1944, she was really on a big pain, but she didn't want to go back from this. She didn't want to stay back from this commando. And in December 1944, finally Siemens opened a special camp for the Siemens forced workers. This was besides the Siemens Production Center. They saved the workers' power with this camp and minimized the danger of illness and epidemics at the Siemens Production Center, which increased 1944 enormously at the main camp. The women at Siemens found themselves in a dilemma of which they could hardly escape. The Dutch prisoner Art Breuer summarized it in the words, I quote, "On the one hand, one certainly doesn't want to support the German war economy, but on the second hand, one doesn't know what to do to survive." There's another example from Karolina Zlanska, who is quite important for Polish memory. She was a special prisoner at Ravensbrück, and she was told by other prisoners when she came to the camp, don't go to Siemens because they work for war economy and you don't want to work for them. So this was a topic in the camp. But maybe this dilemma was one of the reasons why the topic resistance and sabotage dominate the narratives of the former prisoners. Other women, especially from Eastern Europe, kept quiet about forced labor at such known company after the war. They didn't want to be accused for collaboration and started to talk about it finally in the 90s and after the year 2000. And this is something I have to say for Poland and for the Soviet Union, from the Soviet Union, it was very difficult to find narratives from later times. So we found narratives from after the year 2000, and for the Polish case, I found mainly narratives in form of interviews made at Lund in Sweden right after the war. So in the meantime, the women didn't talk about it. They just said we were unfree. On the other side, we have found testimonies describing women which showed some enthusiasm about their work. And it's not difficult to imagine that this kind of fine mechanical work could have its own attraction. Sometimes they had to be reminded which function and aim their work had. And last but not least, the Siemens commando meant a possibility for mothers to get together with their older daughters, because Siemens asked younger women and bigger children to work at Siemens because of their hands. These were some spots I wanted to put on the Siemens commando at Ravensbrück and on the dilemma and the very different position the women had. And out of this project, this exhibition was made, because in the end of this book, which is more an anthology of testimonies, we were thinking about, well, we should show some pictures of the products which the women made. And then I started to make these pictures, and while making these pictures, these are kind of object portraits. And we started to get to have new questions to the production or about the production at Siemens, and that's why we started to show this exhibition. Perhaps it's another kind of coming closer to this topic. So, and with this, I'd like to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we are having about presenters. Judy Carr with a presentation on the last untold story of the German occupation, the Channel Islands. The presenter will tell you about it.
Yes. That's not it.
No, I know.
Oh, okay. It's not. I can't until it's up. Yeah. How do I?
Is the red for this?
I need the left and the red.
Oh, yeah. No, the bottom one. Just one of the red. Yes.
Hello everyone. My name is Jenny Carr.
Microphone. So much.
Apologies to the translators. Hello, my name's Dr. Jenny Carr. I'm from the University of Cambridge, and I've been doing my fieldwork in the Channel Islands for the last decade or more. And the thing about the Channel Islands, I'll show you a map of where they are in a minute, they were the only part of the British Isles to be occupied by the Germans during World War II. And I'm going to be talking to you about the project which is being sponsored by the EBZ organisation. And it's about this man here, who is my #1 hero from the German occupation. What's my pointing at? Oh no, wrong button. There we go. Okay. So the key questions I'm going to be talking about are where are the Channel Islands? Who are we talking about? Why has the group that I'm looking at been ignored for 70 years? And who was Frank Fowler, this chap here? Why is he important? And I'm going to tell you about the website that the EVZ organisation has sponsored. So, for those of you whose geography is a little bit rubbish, yeah, oops, there you are. This remote control is going to do my head around 20 minutes. Yeah, I know, it's counterintuitive. Here are the Channel Islands, just off the coast of France. They were French once upon a time, but they've been British for 800 years. And the order in size is Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney, Sark, and Herm. My mother's family is from this island, which is why I'm interested in the Channel Islands, I suppose. So, I've been looking at the resistors, the political prisoners in the Channel Islands, because these are the people who were deported, who were made to carry out forced labour. Okay? So there were about 1,300 Channel Islanders out of a combined population of about 65,000. So 1,300 were imprisoned in local prisons for acts of resistance. So that's about 2% of the population. Of those, about 200 to 250 were deported to Nazi prisons and concentration camps, where the majority had to carry out forced labour. And of those, 28 did not return. Now, one of the main reasons why this group have been marginalised in memory is that resistors were seen as stupid criminals. They were seen as troublemakers, because these are the people whose actions could have provoked the Germans into carrying out reprisals. And this perception of resistors as stupid troublemakers, as criminals, has survived for 70 years. So they weren't the heroes, even though they stood up to Nazism. Because the British war narrative focuses on victory and not victimhood. So let me tell you about Frank Fowler, about my hero. He was a journalist on a local newspaper during the occupation, but at night he worked on an underground newspaper because radios were confiscated in June 1942, and listening to the BBC News was illegal and could get you sent to a concentration camp. But at night he listened to the radio, and with his friends, he wrote this underground newspaper, which was called GUNS, the Guernsey Underground News Service. He was informed upon, and he was deported in June 1944. First of all to Frankfurt prison, Frankfurt am Main, and then he went to Naumburg prison, and he was liberated in April 1945. Of the 5 men who worked on this news sheet, only 3 survived. And in 1967, he wrote his memoirs, and only about 3 or 4 political prisoners wrote memoirs, and so this was a very important book because a lot of Channel Islanders went to these 2 prisons, and so his insights into what happened there is very important. Now, Frank Fowler was a witness to the death of many Channel Islanders in these 2 prisons. And after the war, because he was a journalist, he was able to write newspaper articles for the Guernsey Evening Post and the Jersey Evening Press. These articles tell the story of the death of Channel Islanders in prisons. And because the Germans didn't inform the people in the Channel Islands about the death of their loved ones as they died, it was really Frank Fowler who was able to bring the news back to the Channel Islands of the death of local people. So let us move forwards to the 1960s, when compensation was agreed between the British government and the West German government. And I don't know what this is in Polish, I don't know if I need to know. Tell me if it's anything important. £1 million was given to provide compensation for people who were sent to a concentration camp or somewhere similar. Okay, the conditions had to be as bad as a concentration camp. There was £1 million to be distributed. And the thing is that the Channel Islanders were not included in this, because nobody had remembered the Channel Islanders, nobody was thinking about them. And the people, and so when Frank Fowler was writing his memoirs, I just want to read you out a little bit of his memoirs, where he is watching what is happening in the Houses of Parliament where people are debating this, and he's waiting for someone to come forward to remember the Channel Islands. So he wrote, "Patiently, I watched events. I heard of this, that, and the other country paying out money from the Germans to their own people who had been victimised. There were questions in the House of Commons, and that's in the Parliament, and newspaper stories about the type of Englishman who had a right to benefit. I stood by, waiting, anticipating a local awakening. Surely some official in the Channel Islands would realise that there were, in Jersey and Guernsey, people who merited compensation. But I waited in vain." So nobody in the Channel Islands was trying to get compensation for the Channel Islanders. The local government weren't doing it because, of course, those who deserved compensation were the stupid criminals. They were the people who had caused trouble. They weren't interested in helping them. So this is the application form. The people who applied for compensation were people from Britain who had joined the French resistance and perhaps had been caught by the Gestapo and sent to camps. Jewish refugees who came to Britain before 1953, and that included many Poles and Ukrainians, got compensation. And prisoners of war who had somehow managed to end up in concentration camps, British prisoners of war, got compensation. But Frank Faller decided that he personally would help Channel Islanders get compensation. If no one in government was going to help, he was going to do it. And so Frank had this started to build up a huge archive where he wrote letters to other political prisoners, other resistors, and said, "I will help you get compensation. This is how you do it." And he corresponded with the Foreign Office, who were administering the awards. And in 2010, his daughter gave me her father's extensive archive. This is one small part, which contained many testimonies of people's persecution and people's forced labour. And it included all of his correspondence with the Foreign Office over several years. And it included a lot of letters with other political prisoners. So the thing is that this, of course, only formed one small part of all of the compensation claims, because if you remember, the Channel Islanders were just one part of this. Where were everybody else's testimonies? Well, they were in closed government files. And so from 2010 onwards, I phoned the Foreign Office once a week and hassled them. And when I first phoned them, they said, "Oh, nobody's shown any interest in these testimonies for 60 years, so we're going to shred them." So 50 years. And I said to them, "Well, don't you understand that these are important historical documents? There were 4,200 of them, and they were going to shred them." And so I petitioned and petitioned and petitioned the Foreign Office. And if I can get this thing to, no, okay. Back to manual use, no, it's not even working manually.
Next slide.
Yes, the next slide. This has stopped working. Is it going to advance 74 slides all of a sudden? This is where I overrun my 15 minutes. As you can see, I don't read from the text, so if the pictures go, then I'm in trouble. Okay, so basically, it took 6 years, but the Foreign Office decided to release the files to the National Archives. So rather than shredding them, here we go, thank you very much indeed. In 2016, they were released. So it took weekly phone calls for 6 years. And if anyone wants to know how I did it, I'll tell you later. I won't tell you the whole story now. I'm still not advancing. Okay, so I had all of these testimonies, all of these stories of forced labour, and the wonderful EBZ gave me funding to build a website so I could tell the story of these Channel Islanders. And the thing is, the Channel Islanders are important for the British story because they are the only British citizens who were occupied and who were deported by the Germans. So really this is, you know, we're missing the speaker who's going to tell us about British prisoners of war who were used for forced labour, but the interesting about the Channel Islanders. So here we go. The website is called the Frank Faller Archive, after my hero. And this is what the website looks like. It's going to go live in just under a month. So when you get onto the website, you can look at maps. I'm going to show you some pictures from the website. You can search for people and you can search for prisons in camps. So first of all, you can search for for people. So I've got the names of the deported people, but I've also included Jews who were deported. So this is a Polish Jew, Mariana Grunfeld, who was deported from Guernsey. She'd come fleeing Nazism to work in the Channel Islands in the 1930s, but she was deported to Auschwitz, where she died. So you can search for people. This is Harold Ledrulnik, who is the only British survivor of Belsen camp, and he had sheltered a Russian slave worker, and that's why he was deported. So with each person's record, I've written the story of what happened to them based on their compensation. I've got their identity files, I've got their court case records, I've got photographs, I've got testimonies, I've got the International Tracing Service records, I've got records from the National Archives, etc., etc. They're all included in a website, so that instead of these people being forgotten criminals that nobody cares about and nobody knows the story. Sometimes they might be well known because they survived Belsen or something, but nobody knows what happened to them in the camp. Those stories were never told, and the survivors didn't tell their families because they were too horrific. There's also information on the camps where islanders were sent. So there's about 130 different prisons and camps where islanders were sent, including Gross-Rosen. There are other features of the website. There's a blog, there's a news item, there's memorials, resistance trails, which I designed, and there's various other bits and pieces. This is the interactive map of Europe on the site, so people in the Channel Islands, or any of you, can double-click on any of these and read about the prisons and camps where islanders were sent. So you can see this with the Channel Islands being here. You can see they were really sent over quite a wide area of Europe. And then, of course, there's the interactive maps of the Channel Islands. All of these maps you can zoom in on. So the idea of doing the interactive map of the Channel Islands is that school children can look to see who lived in the street where they lived and to find out about people who, I think that would be an interesting thing for school kids. Now, you might be thinking, were there any in the area around here? Yes, here we are in Wrocław. And these are just some of the prisons and camps in this wider general area. And you can see that we have a prison right here in this town where Channel Islanders are, which is the reason why I really want to do that tour. We're just being cancelled. Anyway, so the ones who are in the nearby prisons were, we've got two in Breslau prison. I'm using the German names. So this is Peter Hassel and Evelina Garland, who are in Breslau prison, and I really want to go to see the prison to take a photo for the website. There were 4 people in Gross-Rosen concentration camp, 2 in Dietzdorf forced labour camp and Wrocław prison, and 2 in Opel prison. So here's Breslau prison. Please can we go this afternoon? And I've got an exhibition opening in London on the 19th of October. I have some flyers here. If anyone is going to be in London before the 9th of February, please take a flyer so you can see the exhibition. It's called On British Soil, Victims of Nazi Persecution in the Channel Islands, and it tells the story of Jews, political prisoners, forced labourers, etc. So the website will launch in time for the exhibition. I'm writing profiles at a rate of knots. I've written about 70 biographies out of the 200 so far, and the website will launch when it's not complete, but there'll be there's about 100 profiles of 130 prisons already written, so it's an ongoing work in progress, but we wanted to launch it for the exhibition. So in the closing few slides before I get kicked off the stage, I just want to say, I just want to touch on the subject of changing memory. And if we start with the biggest island in the Channel Islands, it's much more outward looking, the island of Jersey. And at the 50th anniversary of liberation, it was the first time that people began to look at the past and to talk about what they did wrong, what they did right. And it was a time for rehabilitating the memory of political prisoners. So the island's leader, or bailiff as it's called in the Channel Islands, bailiff Philip Balash here, was the first bailiff who had ever come forward and said, we need to remember these people, these were the heroes. So that was really something quite radical. And so this man here, Joe Meyer, was a former political prisoner. who had fought for the memory of him and his friends for, at that point, 50 years, but no one had listened to him. He was seen as a crazy man. So he managed to persuade the bailiff to unveil a memorial on the wall of the prison, which had long since been knocked down, where some of the political prisoners were held. And this was sort of quite a momentous event, and it was really the beginning of people remembering these people in Jersey. And there's a memorial now for the Jersey 21, these are the people who didn't come back from camps and prisons, so that was unveiled in 1996. So you can see that actually there's been a whole generation now in Jersey where people have been ready to talk about these things. But in Guernsey, this is not a subject for discussion. And the reason is because the bailiff of Guernsey, you can see quite recently, those are the dates that he held office. The bailiff was the grandson of the wartime bailiff. And you can see they have an illustrious forebear here who was also bailiff. They're from the ruling family, you might be able to spot that. And the thing is, this man is still alive, he's in his mid-70s. And because his grandfather, because Jews and political prisoners were deported when his grandfather was in office, nobody will talk about the war out of respect to him. As long as he is alive, no one will revisit the past. And so I'm very unpopular in Guernsey because I won't stop talking about it. Because if nobody in Guernsey is going to stand up and say these things, then I will. And that makes me unpopular because I'm an outsider, even though my family's from Guernsey. But I fight on behalf of these people. And so I got this memorial erected in 2015 to the Guernsey 8, the 8 people who didn't come back from prisons and camps. And I got this memorial erected to remember the men who died working on the Guernsey Underground News Service. And as I said, designed resistance trails and things. And I guess I'm quite well known amongst the general population in Guernsey as being the person who fights for this sort of thing. But the authorities are never going to do it. And so I think it's important to do. Now, the question of whether people know about forced labour, the answer is they don't know at all. There is zero public knowledge. And the reason for that is, first of all, I'm the only one doing the research in the world. And I'm the only one who is writing the profiles of these people. And I'm only just discovering, as I write these wartime profiles, of how many were used for forced labour. And it was practically everyone. And so this is really, 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 really new news. It's new knowledge. And so I'm not surprised nobody else knew, because I didn't know until recently that it was, at the time I applied for sponsorship, thank you very much, Foxbot. At the time I applied for sponsorship, I didn't know what percentage of people were carrying out forced labour. It was nearly everyone. And so that's going to be the latest item on the news blog. As soon as I get back to Cambridge, I shall be writing about what a high percentage of people it was carrying out forced labour. So there's been a long fight to get these people rehabilitated and recognised as people who suffered. They weren't stupid criminals, they were heroes. And I think it's really important to celebrate people who stood up to fascism and stood up to the far right, because we're facing that all over again. So I think it's very important to honour these people, honour these people right now. And also, we can remember that they suffered doing forced labour as well. So the fight has been won in Jersey, but not in Guernsey. I've been very active doing activism and, as I say, designing all of these things, and hopefully this exhibition will move to the Channel Islands. There are plans for that to happen. And the website will be used, of course, I think with the website it can be used by anyone in the world, but my primary audience is school children in the Channel Islands, because there's a lot of denial and a lot of people who don't want to know amongst the adults. And so I think it's important to educate the children. And so I've been fighting the fight for a number of years, and I'll carry on fighting, but I think when you start with a new generation, there's less resistance. So that's kind of my mission, my ongoing mission. So if anyone would like a flyer for my exhibition in London, please come and take one. And thank you very much for listening.
All right, let's have a discussion now. Any questions?
My name is I'm sociologists, thank you for all three marvelous, great presentations. And I will ask only one question, because other people probably also want to ask a lot of questions. And I would like to ask about questions related to materiality. Dr. Gennes has partially gravitate to Dr. Chu. So I would like to know, because I myself, I try to write about materiality of the camp and how it's quite a complicated topic, and there's no actual methods in social sciences. The more we know is, oh, sorry, okay, I'm sorry. I just said that there is a problem with methods in social sciences. We try to understand the role of materiality and things in understanding social phenomena such as forced labor or camps and so on and so on. And I myself struggle when I go and work with actual material objects and stories about material objects and how to somehow join and make a story out of these two very different types of sources, so to speak. And I wanted to ask you, how did you do that in your work with Siemens objects, with the stories of what you made? Did you have a method or a theory which was there, or you are led by intuition, and so on and so on? How did you deal with things which are thousands of things, and there's thousands of stories about things? So how to tell a story of things? And that partially gravitates toward Dr. Hardy's question. I wanted to ask about the archive, because you mentioned there are some items. I was wondering, even though the files were supposed to be destroyed, so were there some items? Because it's so harder to keep it alive. That's why there's a lot of objects which disappeared from the campus. So I was just wondering if you have this problem.
Let's select a couple of questions.
Matthias Dietmar from Frankfurt. I got a short question to the man from Vilava. In which way are you connected with the story of the camps?
Can you repeat once again the question? Because
in which way are you personally connected with the history of the camps? My right is interesting.
So, would you like me to answer right now?
No, let's collect some questions. Maybe
Okay, some questions.
answer them. Over there. To the left, to your left.
Yeah, also a question for Mr. Kozarski. Maybe could you elaborate a bit more on the monuments you mentioned? I was wondering who took the initiative to inaugurate them, and also when they were inaugurated.
What? Sorry?
Yeah, okay. So I can answer your question about the methodology of dealing with these objects, because I'm an archaeologist as well, and I've been excavating a labour camp in Jersey over the last 3 years. And if you look in the recently published International Journal of Historical Archaeology, I've just published a special issue on the interpretation of objects from Nazi camps and how we deal with them in terms of concept, in terms of method, in terms of theory, so that will answer all your questions. Okay, so the International Journal of Historical Archaeology, edited by me and Kathy and colleagues. And so you also asked about items from camps. When people applied for compensation, they didn't send in objects, but I've been doing a lot of interviews with families in the Channel Islands, and a lot of the family, or some of the families, have objects. So, for example, one man who was on a forced march to Dachau, but liberated by the Americans, still has a kit bag given to him by the Americans with food in. Obviously, the food's been eaten, but the bag is still there, and we're using that in the exhibition. There's one man who made a paper knife in Buchenwald camp. There's that. There's little objects like that that were made in the camp or tell the story of the camp or the prison. So yes, we do have a series of objects that were brought home, but they tend to be, I suppose, quite small.
They were digitalized in the archive?
Yes, on those people's stories, I have taken a photo of the object and added it.
I'm not really coming from this field, and I'm just starting to work on art. So I'm on the same stage, or perhaps like you. But I'd like to answer on your question. with us today, so you can ask her. And the other name is Dr. Christiane Hess, who works there, and perhaps it would be a good contact for you. In terms of this project, we started with the testimonies of the women who spoke about the product, about the circumstances of production. And then we started, and we had no documents of the Siemens company, what they really produced. So we tried to take the findings and the items from this aerial as a source, to really figure out what they really did, which kind of relays did they produce. Did they produce this one or another one? And we bought some of the products and the other items we found on the field. So we tried to put together like a puzzle the objects. This was one thing. The other thing is when we look on the more artistic items I showed you, this arrays a lot of attention of people, how it was possible to make out of steel toothbrush, for example, such a vineyard. People asking about it. This is, for example, this is why toothbrushes are very, very popular in the past. Or we can figure out, if we ask for the material of the project, we can look where the women work and which working details. So this is a connection between, of course, the labor commandos and the meaning of the objects. So it's perhaps I see it more on the social side. But I think we can discuss it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. So thank you very much for these two questions. The first question is very personal, I think, because asking, maybe I understand that as am I from Bielava or so, never born there, but I'm a regionalist. I love my country, I love my region, I love my neighborhood, and that is why, as a historian, I'm looking deeply inside the history. Because Dzierżoniów, this place, is quite big city and interesting because it is one of the examples when it wasn't earlier a Polish name of this place. It was only Reichenbach. And before, no Polish name. It was the settlement was German, and then after the Second World War, the name was changed because of behavior from Upper Silesia. It doesn't matter. So I think when we talk about Bielava, the region is wonderful. Look, southward is a big chain of mountains, Eulengebirge. In German language, Eulengebirge. Very nice. And it is on the edge of these mountains. So it was really very interesting because on one side it was a very interesting area, seeing the neighborhood. On the other hand, it was a textile center. All places are very important from the weaver industry. And I think that my interest in Bielava was connected, first of all, because of regional science. History of the neighborhood generally. So that is the first. And then the second refers to something more exact, concrete. I think that all places we were talking about are not graves. There are no graves. Normally there is a grave and a plaque, something written. No, here only plant. And all this information is later, because from the beginning of 1960s, and the people were thinking what was during the Second World War there. And really, it occurred that a lot of people died there. And the plaques are in many languages. First of all in Polish, that's quite normal because we are in Poland, but also sometimes in German, but for me the most interesting is the plaque in the park at Parkowa Street, so Park Street, with the 13 Dutch, not only Jews, Dutch inhabitants of the Netherlands, And right now you can read everything about these people. Full name, date of birth, place of birth, and date of death. Because the place of death is always the same. Bielawa. It was the place of death. So I think that when you have any more questions, please ask me. So I love my country, that is firstly, and secondly, I love history. But from the other side, history is okay, why not? But very important for historians is to know languages. Looking for this area, it is needed to know about 8 or 10 languages. Because people from so many countries came there. Thank you very much. And I think that for me it is very important because I made a list of all the dead there, and I'm thinking about finding the members of families of these people. But it's rather a very, very difficult question, but interesting. Thank you.
Some other questions?
Yeah, question for Dr. Kumar. I'm thinking about how it will change the Holocaust Education Union after your research. Because as you said, it's the focus on in the was just, liberation and so on, and nothing right with being a victim. So isn't it, and do you have any connection, or how is it going to change, especially in secondary school?
My name is Anna Mickiewicz, and I also have a question to Julie Carr, who I had a chance to meet 6 years ago, and I know that she's very much involved in doing a lot for the Channel Islands. And I can't understand, this is my question, I can't understand why there is so huge resistance in those people who are against commemoration. Because we in Poland, we do it almost in every street of each town, so we do it. So I can't believe it, that you have so huge resistance. Yeah. So you have to do a huge work to convince them that it's very important for the brand new generations to commemorate, to remember those people. Well, we have to know that, I'm sure there are still some family members of those who were sent to concentration camps, so I just can't believe it. Yeah. And one question to Mr. Pisarski. I work at the Central Prisoner of War Museum at Mogilewicz Opole, and I know that in Gross-Rosen there were not only prisoners, but also prisoners of war. And I wonder if in Bielawa there were also prisoners of war, or only prisoners?
Only prisoners.
Only prisoners. Civilians. Only civilians. I see.
And civilians working at factories. Okay. It is also important to stress and focus that all the people being at Bielawa were working as normal civil or civic workers. So no prisoners of war were here. It was too far to Gross-Rosen main camp. It's about 25 kilometers. So only at Gross-Rosen were the POWs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question concerning the model type occur in his production center. There was model type program Max Brewer and many other scholars mentioned in their research the problem of discrimination regarding the population rights for community rights. Siemens Production Center was a different situation where the Polish response to
Shall we?
Okay, so the first question was about, am I doing anything about Holocaust education in the UK? And the answer is yes, I certainly am. I'm preparing an education pack for the Holocaust Educational Trust to be used not just in the Channel Islands but throughout the United Kingdom on the Channel Islands story. I've also been, when I first started doing this work, I started to make regular trips to London to meet the United Kingdom Holocaust, what is it, the UK HMF, Holocaust Memorial Foundation. Always forget what it stands for. To sort of say to them, don't forget about the Channel Islands, And so last year I was invited to join the UK delegation of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IRA, and I'm always banging on about the Channel Islands there. So I'm sort of, speaking loudly and as often as I can to raise awareness. And hence this exhibition in London, I think, is an important step for sort of educating people right in the centre that that this is an important part of the British story of the Holocaust. And also, I'm talking to the National Holocaust Centre in Nottingham as well about moving the exhibition there. So hopefully, I'm just sort of trying to get the word out. And then I think the next question is about from Anna about why is there resistance in the Channel Islands to commemorating these political prisoners and forced labourers? And I think, as I say, one of the reasons is because this guy whose grandfather was the bailiff during the war is still alive. And the thing is that to start talking about this would mean talking about collaboration. And collaboration is the one word you do not say in the Channel Islands, and you do not say that word in Guernsey, because the thing is there were no trials after the war. No trials at all. And so this means that collaboration wasn't defined and nobody was punished. And people just said, that there were actually no laws in the Channel Islands to condemn people who had committed collaboration. There simply wasn't a law. And they said that it went against British notions of justice to invent new laws that you can apply to the past. And so simply there were no laws, and they said it wouldn't be good for national morale to try people for collaboration, not that we had the laws anyway, so there were no trials. And so, when I go to the Channel Islands, people might say to me, my grandmother did the washing of a German soldier, is she a collaborator? And they're very scared. And, and the thing is, that collaboration it's just growing as something that people are more and more and more scared of. And so when I go to the Channel Islands, sometimes there'll be articles in the paper about, oh, that bloody Ginny Carr, all she talks about is collaboration. I don't talk about collaboration, I talk about resistance. But they're so scared of it that even when I don't talk about it, I'm accused of talking about it, because they're scared that I'm the one doing the research and I'm the one who's seen the documents, so I'm the one who can let the cat out of the bag, I'm the one who can talk about it. And they're just very scared that I will. And I know better that if I start to talk about it, then it'll be the end of my field work, because no one will want to talk to me. So I don't talk about it. But yes, I know about it. But so that's what they're scared of, and that is the main fear. I mean, in the British war narrative anyway, is it's what we call the Churchillian narrative, a narrative after Winston Churchill, who his speeches were all about enduring whatever the Germans did. If the Germans bomb us, we can endure it, we can put up with it, we can take it, that's fine, keep bombing us, we'll survive, we'll win. So the focus is on enduring the bad things, but we will win. And the focus is on victory. And that narrative doesn't involve talking about victims. So these are all of the reasons that all get mixed together, which means that, it's what they're scared of talking about, or what they're... But I'm just sort of a one-woman show trying to change things.
I hope, Julie, that one day you're going to be the hero for those people.
Well, the other thing is it's not so big, so you're the one who is seen as someone who blames the families.
I don't blame them.
I know, but you're seen as maybe I can compare this with the situation in Germany and Zambostel, which was a big POW camp in the north of Germany between Hamburg and Bremen. And we wrote an exhibition, we made an exhibition about it, and every day, it was over in 2013, it was quite late for a memorial sign, And every day people came and said, why are you making a memorial for POW camp? POW camps are everywhere. This was part of the war. Why in our area we know each other, we blame the families. And with the day the exhibition was open, this was over. Because they saw that there was a big interest from the international side. They saw all of the union. They saw people from the Soviet Union, from France, and they saw that we tell stories about good people and bad people, and that's important.
They were channeling this in some way.
Yeah, yeah, this was some stuff that I was telling about, but perhaps that's an explanation. But I'd like to answer on the other question. Siemens was not part split, but it was linked to I mean that the troopers came from the main camp every day to the fabrication and went back. But in December 1944, they opened the little camp for the coursework. So this is important. And they looked, as I said, in detail for people with small hands. So they looked for children. In fact, there were children with 12, 13, 14 years in the camp. And that was why I said it was a possibility for some mothers to be together with their children, which was not possible in other commands. There was no detailed mother-child program. But in 1944, about 12,000 women and children from the Warsaw Uprising came to Ravensbrück, and many of these women were pregnant. And this was a very hard situation because a lot of women lost their children, or they were murdered, or they died. Most of them died because the mother had no milk. But survived a number of children, and nowadays there live still some children who were born in the camp in the last weeks, but also only in the last weeks. It was a little different, like, for example, we know from Auschwitz, but it was very difficult to survive the revolution in Auschwitz.
All right, thank you very much. Because of time pressures, we have to move on. We have to finish. Thank you very much. There is lunch awaiting, so we can continue this discussion. Thank you.